Hello, principles and methods of teaching class students. Thank you very much for submitting your second assignment. I have enjoyed reading your interactions with Hendrickson's book about the 7 laws of education. We have gone through the first 2 laws. We are currently on the law of education. I am sure that you guys are going through the 3rd chapter, as it has been an assignment for the last week. So last week, if you remember, I have uploaded several videos trying to show you what teaching methods are and how teaching methods work. So today what I will try to do is I'll give you a lecture on teaching methods, and I will upload this as a discussion also. However, for this week, I also want to talk about learning objectives. It's a lot to actually put within this week's lesson, but we'll try to do it nonetheless. I would like to pray for this class, but I want to do it at the end of the class so that we'll have some time to actually interact with the material that we have done. So today I'm going to discuss the idea of teaching methods, which is a last element of the teaching learning methods idea. So the idea here that we're going to discuss is going to be, what are teaching methods? So what do we think a teaching method is? We have to be very conscious not to confuse our content with our teaching method, or our teaching method with our teaching evaluation. Each of them are distinct elements of teaching. We've been talking about why do we teach? What's the purpose of teaching? What type of teacher should we be? We've taken the examples of Jesus as a master teacher and the role of the Holy Spirit in our teaching learning method. The next issue is going to be, okay, so if we are going to be teachers as that of Christ, and if our teaching and learning is geared towards transformation, bringing about the formation of Christ within every believer, how do we go about doing that? The next question is, how do we teach our students? So that is through teaching methods. Now, a teaching method is a means by which one accomplishes a certain desired goal. So any method, like cars are a method of transportation. This computer is a method of teaching. So anyway, that is a means, a tool that we use, masara, that we use in order to accomplish a goal we have in mind. The purpose of making disciples for the glory of God by formation of Christ in their life is our purpose. So how do we accomplish that purpose? We accomplish it through teaching methods. And what's a good teaching method? It's a one that engages the student in an interaction with their environment, as referred to as the learning activities or learning experience. So we have this idea of not just the students receiving. You have read it last 2 weeks ago on the law of education, where the student is not just a mere passive recipient of information. Rather, students need to be engaged, they need to be active, they need to be people who are willing to learn in your class. So we have to start thinking about teaching method, not from the perspective of just the teacher giving students information, but also a means of interacting with each other. And there are varieties, the variety is very much essential in the teaching learning process. Lecturing will just be very much boring. If you go to your churches and if you start teaching, and if you're just the one who's talking, then it's going to be very boring. It's nice to have a conversation between each other. And in order to do this, we have different categories of teaching method. If you read last week's lesson, you'd be familiar with this. The first one is teacher to student. So this is a teacher directly giving content to the student. This is very much essential. I know we bit down on ideas of lecture and the teacher being the center of the class, but it's inevitable. Within the learning hierarchy, the teacher is at a better place than the student is, and that's just a means of bringing the student to the place where the teacher is. So we have to have that idea of the teacher-centered teaching methods, or teacher to student teaching methods. These are like lectures, storytelling, object lesson. If you bring something to class, for example, if you want to teach about how to use a phone, just bringing a phone and telling them, okay, this is what a phone is. And the second one is student to teacher method. This is a more student-centered learning. So if you go to higher education, like your graduate studies or postgraduate studies, the focus shifts from the teacher as at a hierarchy, but the student, the teacher being at the same level, in which the student also contributes to the learning activity. So projects and memory work and testing. For example, in the church setting, we can think of memorization of verses. These are more student-teacher perspective. And then we have teacher with student. So this is one that I really love because it's a facilitation tool. It's not necessarily the teacher just giving information or the student doing something independently and coming back. It's both the teacher and the student facilitating information between each other. So these are like class discussion and question and answer, interacting ideas and growing ideas together. And the next one is group activity. These are debates, panels, buzz groups, drama, where the students do not learn independently or just receive things from the teacher independently, but they come together and interact with each other so that they could grow together. And then we have instructive play. This is very much essential for it, especially with children and youth, but it's most definitely applicable to every age group. So games, puppets, puzzles, role play, action songs. I usually ask my students to do a certain simulation or role play in each of my teaching classes, them as a teacher and the rest of the class as a student, because it's a very essential way to see if a particular skill has been learned by the student. And the last one are non-classroom activities. These are not bounded by the four walls of a classroom, but rather you go out into the world, you engage yourself with the world. This is very much evident in many science-based classes, in like chemistry and biology, and maybe even geography. You see your students going out, they go to the laboratory, they go to the field, they collect data, they learn from real life situation in the world. So it's very much plausible not to just think of education and teaching methods from what the teacher is just giving the students. Lecture is a good method, but it's not the only method we have. Like I said, variety is essential. Don't bore your students with just one teaching method. There are multiple teaching methods that could originate from the teacher or from the student, or the teacher and the student could facilitate them together, or even the students on their own could learn in a group. So we have to be very conscious how we categorize and understand the teaching and learning methods we have. And in doing this, how do we choose a teaching method? How do we choose a lecture from a drama, from a memorization, from field trip? What facilitates us to choose teaching methods? The first one is, does it help achieve your lesson objective? And lesson objective is my next lecture. So does it achieve what you want to do in that class today? So when I gave you videos last week and lecture this week, it's within mind where I wanted to achieve a particular lesson objectives. I wanted you to start thinking about, okay, how do we go about teaching students in different ways in accordance to our lesson objective? Our lesson objective is the most important element in our teaching learning process. We cannot have any method, any content, or any evaluation tool if we do not have a well-constructed lesson objective. The second one is the method suitable to the age group of the students? This is something that we should be conscious about. If you start lecturing children between the age of 3 to 6, none of them are going to listen to you because they don't have the attention span. A 3-year-old has a 6-minute attention span. That child is not going to listen to any lecture. However, when a person is an adult, when you have a group of people in their 30s and in their 40s, rather than having a game to play with these people, it would be better to have discussion as they have much to contribute. So think of age and how do you teach within the age. And the next one is the method suitable for the class size you have? Imagine, for example, you have a discipleship class that has like 50 students in it. How do you go about engaging the students? How do you go engaging 50 different students while maybe you have like 10 students in your Bible study group? So you have to be very conscious how to do with the class size and choosing the method on the class size. Is the method suitable for the content of the lesson? For example, deep theological discussions. Let us talk about the incarnation of Christ Jesus. So if you just open a Bible verse and say, okay, let us discuss about the incarnation of Jesus, that's not very smart. People are just going to read the text and they're just going to tell you their understanding and not do proper hermeneutics to the text or even come up with the proper theology which the church has built. So you have to be very conscious of what lesson that you have at hand when you choose your teaching method. Would it be better to lecture it? Would it be better to show them a video? Would it be better to have a discussion about it? What would be better in order to introduce the content? And the next one is, can the method be used with the available resources you have, space and materials? So this is something, for example, I could tell you, I have a large Sunday school class I teach every Sunday. These are children between the age of 13 to 16. And I have a very large room. So I usually use the auditorium of the church to teach these children. So every week I play games with them. They perform in a drama, they do memorization, we do a little bit of physical activity with each other. And then we do a little bit of discussion. And I love that room because I don't have to teach the students in a row. We have this really huge circle where I could have eye contact with each student as much as I can. So what does space and resources give you? Do you have curriculums at hand that you could use with your teaching material, or do you prepare your curriculum? So it's very essential to ask yourself, what do I have at hand? And then, is the material suitable to the educational background of the students? So are the students capable enough to understand and good enough to respond with the teaching method that you're doing? For example, let us say you're doing a class discussion that would amount to a project. So what does the literacy level of your students look like? If these are people with low literacy level, if these are people with poor reading speed, it's going to be very difficult for you. So who are your students? And we have the Hendricks touched this very importantly in the law of education. You teach as much as your students learn. You don't teach beyond that. And I've said it on the first day of class. Teaching is causing learning. If the student have not learned, the teacher has not taught. So we have to be very conscious and ask the question, has the student learned? And the next one is, can the method be completed with the allotted time? If you're running out of time every single class, then you have to ask the question of, okay, maybe I should change my method. And then another one is, does the teacher possess the ability and the skill to use the method? Let us say you choose games, but you don't know how to play games with the students. One of the many is memorization. You ask your students to memorize a verse and you meet them next week and you have not memorized the verse. And that does not fly very well. We teach out of experience. We teach out of what we have already learned. So be as much an expert in the teaching method as possible. Will the method meaningfully involve the student? So the most important word here is meaningfully. Do we meaningfully involve the students? Do they feel like they're contributing to something? Especially above the age of 12, any student would like to contribute to the teaching learning method. It's not comfortable to just sit and take something. You want to give in from the idea that you have learned. So I advise to consider the students in that area. And does the method involve variety in the learning experience? Or does the student feel passive? Do they just sit in the class and be bored at it? So these are like the methods you can use to choose. These are the factors that would help you choose a teaching method. A simple suggestion I would have will be choose 3 or 5 out of this whole thing and just put it for yourself. Because if we're going to be teachers, we need to be real teachers. We need to teach for the student to learn. We can't teach for just assuming that we're just, giving information. Rather, we have to understand if the student is truly learning. And how do you evaluate a method? So one, does it accomplish the aim? Is the objective accomplished? So when you write an objective for a particular lesson, it needs to end that day. So by the end of the day, by the end of the lesson, by the end of you introducing the particular lesson, is that aim accomplished? Second, its provision of guidance and encouragement to the students. Does the teacher, do you as a teacher feel lost? We all know a teacher who's not prepared when he stands to teach, right? We feel like maybe this person could have prepared a little bit more than this. And that's mainly because of teaching method. There's also content, but also teaching method matters. Does it help the students retain information? We don't want students to remember information. We want them to retain it in their head. We want them to actually remember it and put it in use after the class or the course has ended. Does it hold interest and does it encourage participation? If your students are not participating in your class, then you have to ask a question. One of the main problems with online education, as you can see, is participation. Because I don't believe if you're not participating, then I'm not sure if you're really learning. So I have to understand if you truly are learning. And then is there a displayed behavioral change and attitudinal change? And also skill change. So does the head, the heart, and the hand change? Do we see a cognitive growth? Do we see an attitudinal or affective growth? And do we see a skill growth? Do we see this person having better knowledge, better behavior, and better skill then after we have told the student. So these are simple tools to ask yourself, okay, is my method effective? Because at the end of the day, you'd have to change your method and do the same content again if it's not effective. And then there are 7 basic teaching methods I want to just glance over with you. So these are the basic 7 that we call. These are the most repetitive teaching methods we see in class, which are lecture, question and answer, group discussion, case study, brainstorming, projects, and storytelling. So I'll quickly and briefly go through each one of them. So a lecture method is, lecture could be with demonstration, question and answer has content, opinion, attitude, and emotion of the students engaged in it. Group discussion could be done in a small group option. Large groups are not encouraged to do group discussions, or if you have a large class, breaking it up into smaller groups where each participant gets to voice their opinion is important. We have case studies. We can do case studies in several ways. We can do brainstorming. This is an inductive question and answer method. It is not exactly question and answer where you come up with the question and the right answer is found from the students. Rather, it's to help the students think through a particular idea. Then we have projects where we research things, and storytelling. These are contemporary parables. Remember, Jesus was excellent in all of this. He did a great lecture. Mount on the Sermon is a great lecturing method. We all know he did question and answer, simple ideas of who do people say I am, or how do you understand this? And he did group discussions. He sat with his disciples and he said, the others do not have the privilege of knowing this, but for you, he had brainstorming with each one of them, not necessarily in a case we understand, but in each case he had asked them to see how they can do things. He projects Yasaracho, we see him dividing them in twos and then sending them so that they could practice preaching the gospel. And I mean, he's the king of parables, no question about that. So really, if you look at this, these are time-proven, time-tested teaching methods that we can actually use in each of our classes. Now, a lecture is when one person, one speaker is speaking into a large audience. So basically, a lecture is a different, preaching is a different format of a lecture. Subkat is just lecture in a different form. You use a lecture whenever and only if you are giving information where the students do not learn, the learners are already motivated. You can't start something with a lecture. They have to be already motivated. There needs to be in their mind an understanding that they need to receive particular information in which they are lacking. የማያውቁት ነገር እንዳለ ማስተዋል አለባቸው። መጀመሪያ motivated መሆን አለባቸው lecture ለማዳመጥ. You're skilled in using word pictures. You can't use a monotonous tone. We can't do that. We have to be the kind of people who can do word pictures. There are people with verbal intelligence. Don't do lectures if you can't speak for a very long time at a given moment. You have to understand that you'll be able to speak. መድረክ ላይ ቆም ብለን ንግግሮቻችን ኢሉስትሬሽኖች የማይመጡልን ከሆነ ምሳሌዎች የማይመጡልን ከሆነ using lecture is not the best tool that you can use. The group is too large for any other method. If you have a very huge group, like I said, Sunday gathering is a very good example. ጠዋት ስንሰበሰብ ሌላ መንገድ ስለምናጣም ነው አንድ እንደዚህ የምናደርገው, and another it's an instruction, and the last one is reviewing or previewing a lesson. So for example, if it's like, it should always be the smallest amount of lecture should always take the smallest amount of time. It cannot be the majority of what you do in a class. የትኛውንም ክላስ ስናስተምር majority of our time lecture መሆን የለበትም. We just need to give them the major information and then stop there and ask the students to contribute into the lecture. And we have advantage of a lecture as it provides information to the students. It's a very good way to introduce a new topic to the students. However, the disadvantage of the lesson is lecture is that it's not engaging. The students are not active in it. They're very much passive in it, and it's very disruptive. And then we have the question and answer method. The question and answer method is a series of queries and responses designed to test comprehension of a body of material and understanding one's reaction to it. Like I said earlier, When you do question and answer, it's because you have already given an information and you would like the students to react at a particular point. You want the students to say, I understand this, or, oh, maybe I have a question on this. It helps to review last week's information. Start your classes with question and answer. Solicit opinions of people. Give them an information and say, what do you think about this? Remember the incarnation example, Jesus incarnate in the Hona. You don't start that with a question and answer. You don't ask them, okay, what do you think about this? You give them a lecture and hear their opinion. It helps to assess opinion and gauge emotions. You kind of try to taste the waters, see what they are feeling about the information that you have already given them. So we have an advantage of question and answer, which helps the students engage in the class. Engagement increases learning. Student engagement always increases learning. When the students are engaging, they're thinking, they're coming into the process of contributing to the information that's already been given. While the disadvantage of a question and answer would be, it would take a lot of time. And if the teacher is not well prepared, it could actually veer the direction of the discussion. If the teacher raises an idea, then the students would actually go through the question of, maybe he doesn't know the answer, maybe the content is not right. በደንብ የማናውቀው ነገር ላይ ተማሪዎቻችን question and answer ማንሳት ከጀመሩ either bold መምህራን ሆነን, okay, listen class, I don't know the answer for this particular issue, I'll come back to it later. We have to say that, or we just don't have to raise questions that we don't have the answer to. And the next one is group discussion. A group discussion is a planned conversation. This is a very essential word. It's a planned conversation. It does not like come out of nowhere. It does not happen in a vacuum. The teacher just can't come into class and say, okay, group discussion. We have to plan it out, and then it needs to engage people. We have to ask them, okay, read on this and come back, because we will have a group discussion you will contribute to. Bible studies are a good example of group discussion and a very bad example of group discussion. Because one, the small number, the homogeneity that happens between the students and then is very important. The problem with the Bible studies in most churches in Ethiopia is because the topic is introduced that day. These people will just have to come up with ideas. Rather, group discussion should be planned. It's a place where we share ideas. So we bring ideas from our reading. It's where we share our ideas. It's to stimulate interest in a problem. It helps members express their ideas, and it identifies and explores different problems. So a great advantage of group discussion, again, engagement of students, and you hear different information. When you have a group discussion, people come from extensive backgrounds. So they will bring different insights to it. So one person would look at it from this perspective, another from another. Imagine teaching incarnation from people who came from different religion. ከኢስላም ለመጣ ከጆሆቫ ዊትነስ ለመጣ ከኦርቶዶክስ እምነት ከመጣ ከኖሚናል እምነት ለመጣ ከኖሚናል ክርስቲያኒቲ ለመጣ ከትራዲሽናል ሪሊጅን የመጣ ሰዎች ጌታን አምነው ቁጭ ብለው when you are talking about incarnation, imagine how what they would contribute into it, how much of a contribution it would come into them, because the Orthodox guy is not going to talk the same with the Muslim guy or the person who came from the traditional religion one. Each of them would have great contributions. But the disadvantage of, again, group discussion is the fact that we ask our students to immediately contribute. If it's unplanned, then it would have a problem. Another one would be case study. A case study is an account of a problem situation, including sufficient detail to make it possible for the group to analyze the problems involved. So a case study is like bringing the life of a person. You remember Jesus' example about talent. He said, this rich guy, he gave his 3 servants different talents. For one, he gave him 5, for the other, he gave him 4, for the other one, he gave him 1. And then he went away, and then he came back. That's a case study. That's a way of understanding on, okay, what would you do and how would you live out in this particular situation? It's a slice of life. It's something that's within the contemporary situation of the people. You bring it in and you say, aha, so how would you do it? What do you think about this? How would you solve this issue? So it's a diagnosis, prescription, and possible treatment. So you bring a problem in to say, what do you think is the problem? How can you treat it? Okay, what would be your solution for the church? So this is a thing that would be presented to the class. It shows the students analytical skill. It shows the students very well breaking down an information and presenting each element of an information towards a particular solution. Case studies could be used to relate a problem to a life solution. to analyze a problem. And then they say content will be up here and the life of the student will be down here. But this is brought together with a good case study. An excellent case study will show people, it is part of life. And it helps member identify problems and analysis skills are developed. Now, it's very advantageous where it helps the students independently think and contribute new ideas. While the disadvantage could be if it's not a well-prepared case study, the students will fail out through it. And then we have brainstorming. Brainstorming is a method of problem solving in which group members suggest in a rapid fire order all the possible solutions they could think of. This is an unplanned kind of discussion where the students just tell you off their head what they're thinking. So evaluation of ideas come in later. So when you do brainstorm, when should you do brainstorming? To encourage creative thinking, to encourage participation of students, to start thinking about problem solutions. It's just one of the first steps that you can do. And then the advantage of a brainstorming is to help the students engage the material primer hand, while the disadvantage of brainstorming could be, again, if not well prepared, the students will be lost in the middle of their own thoughts. And we have projects. Projects are things like homework. There are activities to be conducted outside of classroom. So these are not a classroom thing, they are outside of the classroom, where the students develop, for example, to encourage participants to develop skills in biblical exegesis. So if you remember your exegesis classes, your teacher gave you an exegetical material or a text and he said, exegete this text. That's a project. It encouraged participants to research biblical concepts and relate to real life situations. And another one is storytelling. It's a contemporary parable. It's a very Christian thing to do storytelling. It encourages the learners to relate biblical truths to life situation. It also inspires and motivates learners. When you do storytelling, the students feel like you're bringing the content down to earth. You're actually engaging real life situation with the students. So these are the different teaching methods that you can actually use with the students. So the 7 are the basic ones you can use. One assignment I'd ask you to do this week is going to be just go through this and tell me which one you have used a lot and which one could be better for the class that you're teaching while you're doing this course. I do hope this has been a good one, but please write any questions that you have, any issues you might have on the discussion board. I'll be posting this. Thank you very much.